I'm Mark Root and welcome back to Nomad Boat Building, and we are working on the 2.4 meter project. On the last episode we started messing around with the in-whales or clamps. Well, we're going to finish up that little project and we're going to move on to some other bits and pieces that are going into the boat. So let's get right down to work. Just getting ready to glue in my in-whales, shear clamps, whatever you want to call them. So I've got them both sanded and wetted out, and I've got my shear here is ready to get a layer of epoxy into it. I need to get some thickened stuff into my curves here, actually. Just realized. Okay. So my standard operating procedure is if I have one part that's wetted out, I try and apply the thickened epoxy to the other part. In general, both parts should be wetted out. However, in some cases, like this one, these parts are already coated in epoxy. There's no need to wet them out. But the other part was just raw wood, so it will benefit from being wetted out best. But I like to have a wet-to-wet contact surface, so that means that this side gets the thickened epoxy. If I was doing something like a plywood lap strike boat, what I would tend to do is wet out the side that has the exposed end grain, which is usually the hull, and then I would wet out the surface of the lap surface of the plank. But then I usually apply the thickened epoxy to the portion that's on the mold, just because the thing that is not going anywhere, it's easier to stay clean. If you start handling something that's covered in thickened epoxy, it's so easy to just sort of hit stuff and get it everywhere, so I try and avoid doing that. So I've just got this epoxy thickened out with their filleting blend, West Systems filleting blend, the 405 filler, and I ideally would be using the 406 silica, colloidal silica, but I don't have any. I've used it all up, and I didn't realize that before I started this little glue up here, so I'm kind of stuck with not a lot of choices. But this filleting blend is a good choice. It adds some strength and flexibility. It does the job of keeping it from sagging. I was talking about, just getting gunk everywhere. Okay. You might note that I put a little stick across the stern of the boat, and that's just to keep this clamp from dropping down into the hull and getting epoxy all over the place. So my goal here is to try and just get this in-whale to sit just at the top edge of the planking. When you're doing stuff like this, it's fairly important just to walk the part into the boat, because if you go and pinch this down here, you could create sort of a hard spot where the plank and the in-whale don't want to meet properly. So I'm just carefully putting these guys, roughly every foot to try and get this nicely laid in here. I'd ideally like to put them more frequently, but I'm a little tight on well-padded clamps. Little feet missing on so many of them. I don't want to cause too much destruction on the surface of my varnish out here. Need to do more varnishing, but still. As I get down to this end, it needs to twist a little bit more, and so I need to use a few more clamps. And down here where I've got my curved portions, it's just an incredible mess here. So I'm going to do my best to clean it up, but may not do so well. Stick across there again. Maybe. Do. Wait. All right. The great danger here is that this goes flying across the room before I'm done. So let's get a clamp there to stop that. There's our first cross ball, it goes in right there. Yep, I think it's going to be fine. Here. Alright, it's just mop up time, add more clamps, and try and clean up all the goo. By the time I'm done, I'll have used up, I think, every spring clamp I have in the place, and then some. Our shear clamp is all glued in, and the epoxy is all cured right now. I just haven't taken all these clamps out. I'm just thinking about what to do back here in the stern, and decided we want a substantial piece of blocking in here because there is some rigging that comes right down to the tail end. The backstay basically lands back in here. So I think decided to pull out the old little pattern tool. And I don't know exactly what the configuration of this is going to be, but for the most part I think we're just going to make up a solid block that will drop down in here, and I will slide it aft until it fits nicely. I don't know how I'm going to incorporate it in with the shear clamp here just yet, but this is a nice piece of yellow cedar 3x3, so I'm just envisioning a chunk of that dropped into there. And of course it all gets faired off with the shear of the boat. So we'll start with that and we'll see how it looks, and if I need to add more material or remove material, we'll take it one little step at a time. I very, very rarely use one of these things. It just doesn't really come up that often in boat building, believe it or not. It can't quite give me the whole pattern, the whole shape that I need, but it gets me the bulk of it, and I think I can extrapolate from there. I set it up to take the pattern at this point here, which is the thickness of this blocking, which is what I'm going to use to fit in here. So we'll just cut it and fit it in there, and then the whole thing will get sort of shaved off to match the shear line here, and it'll give us a nice little piece of meat for the backstay to fasten into. I could use Sitka spruce for this, but because a fastener is likely to come into here, it always introduces the potential for moisture, and yellow cedar is far, far superior to deal with that than Sitka spruce is. So I'm going to go with the yellow cedar back here. And I think I might do the same thing up at the bow where I've got to do a breast hook. So I think I'll just use a little yellow cedar breast hook instead of Sitka there for the exact same reason. So let's see, I think that's going to be I got a little bit of sapwood here, so I want to put that towards the outside where it's going to disappear when we're done. Get ferret off. So if I use this side of my pattern here, let me think for a second. Go like that. Nope. Okay. This, that. Yeah. Okay. This is the side we want here. Swing this over a bit. Zoom in a bit and up a little bit and over a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to eyeball a bunch of this stuff here. Come in a little ways. I'll show you something I can do to try and pick up the rest of this shape here as soon as I'm done. Okay, I think that's reasonable. So what I can do is I could use this guy over here. I should get a better version of this thing because this one's pretty cheap and junky. And this sort of thin blades tend to kind of hang up on stuff a bit easily. So I'm just going to pick up this contour here. Okay, and with that, I've got the bottom, I've got the contour, and then I got where it notches around this guy, and I think I'm just going to chop these square out of there. But I won't worry about that for now. So now I can take this. I guess I should do it on this side, maybe? I don't know. There's no best way to do this because I'm getting a little bit of parallax error with this now. I'm just gonna envision that comes straight out like that. Flip this over, and the other side should be fairly symmetrical, so I'll just assume it is. This is one of those parts that ends up being a bit of a cut and fit operation. And we'll just use a little ship sweep here to try and refine that line a bit better. So it's not very pretty. This is one of those things I could probably even pull this off my lofting if I really wanted to, but ooh. Back up just a second because I forgot I actually have some blocking here. And that should be controlling the shape, so I should really have that in place. Come on, let's get back to where it ought to be. Okay, better check that again because that might make a bit of difference there. Yes, it does. In fact, maybe I should start from scratch. Not a dumb idea. Just to check it. Yeah, so you see my gauge just barely fits the spot now that I've tweaked that shear back into shape. And of course we want this block to help hold that in shape. Okay. Actually looks pretty darn good, so let's see what are the differences. Shove a couple of these guys down to show me where the termination of the planking is. Put there. So I've just given myself a couple reference lines squaring off of my the notch that needs to go over top of the keelson here. And now my next step is to figure out my bevel. That's a little bit tricky to figure out here, because it's not necessarily a straight bevel. So what I think I might do, maybe we'll use the block here itself. This end appears to be square. Yep, it is. So that'll give me a reference face. I'm not sure if my bevel here is long enough to make the reach, but let's see. So there's no bevel off the bottom, but here all I'm basically trying to do is give myself an idea as to what I can set my bandsaw at that will give me a reasonably accurate first step. I'm going to have a whole bunch of shaping to figure out here. Feels a little more accurate there. I'm not sure about coming straight off of here. I need to. Sometimes when you need to figure out how to come straight off of a face, you need something else to sort of help you judge. I don't know. Probably not super accurate, but it's not too bad. Okay, so basically there's my line right there. Hopefully that is good. I'll have this face the same. So that'll go in this way. Yeah, maybe. Alright, well, I think I'll start by going, I know it's square, basically square down here, and then winds over to this. And I can't wind my bandsaw. I'm a fixed bevel bandsaw. So I think we'll start by just cutting it square, and then I'll figure out how to get this bevel on there. Okay, I've got my notch here so that it's fitting reasonably well. And I'm not shooting for like a seamless finish here. I'm going to be using epoxy to put this all together. So, you know, if I get it within a 1/16 of an inch, I'm really quite fine. Let's see what we can do about trying to fit the rest of it. So got that angle there and that angle there looks okay. These are fine, so it's really just this space in here. And exactly how to fit that is the question. I think I'm going to have to just go with eyeballing it, to be honest, because there's no good way to describe this to fit. Go up. Nope, there is no good way. It's one of these unscribable things. It's a cut and fit, cut and fit, cut and fit. So it's back to the bench to do a bunch of whittling and do my best to try and get this shape. So what I can do though is I could take, say, this shape right here. I'll just lay it off on this guy. At least it gives me an indication as to how far I need to come in. I know I need to come up to there. I don't know. This might work. Shoot for that line, maybe. Maybe. We'll try that. Okay, I've been back and forth about 100 times, and I'm at the point where I'm just chasing my tail trying to get this fitting any better. So it's not bad. It's like within a 1/16 all the way around, and around the front here it's actually quite a bit tighter, but it is very difficult fitting two very organic shapes together like this. You can do it, you can get it down to where it's perfect, but the reality is it does not have to be perfect. It just needs to be close enough that we aren't relying on a massive amount of epoxy to create the mechanical joint between the two. And to be totally honest, more epoxy is actually better to a degree. Every boat builder wants to see a perfectly seamless fit between one part and another part, just like luthiers. But the reality is it's not necessarily worth it a lot of the time. This time it is definitely not worth it. This is going to be completely buried. No one's ever going to see this. And when someone does see it, it's probably because they're trying to chop it out. So we're not going to worry about it. We're going to call it good. We're going to trim this off to get rid of the bulk of the waste, and we're going to get it glued into place. And then I need to think about how to doctor up the ends of these inwales to jive up with the ends of this blocking, because I had to chop these a bunch. I kind of butchered the ends of these a bit, trying to get this guy to fit into place. So now I got to figure out a good way to fix it. And truthfully, I probably don't really need to do anything, but I'm going to do something. So that's my next task. Okay, just giving this a very generous buttering up. It's going to be a whole pile of squeeze out, and that's just fine. So here's our tail block. I stupidly didn't really think through how I was going to clamp this in place. Of course, it's epoxy, you can get away with not clamping, but I kind of feel like this needs a little something to hold it where it is. So one thing I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to start by putting a little finishing nail in here to keep it from drifting further aft. And then I don't know if I can get quick grip clamps to hang on here. Oh yeah, maybe. Okay, I'll try that. Okay, no. When sort of a gentle touch is required, sometimes my shop-made cam clamps are the best way to go. Alright, that looks really good. That worked pretty good. Now I just got some little filler pieces here where my inwales had to get cut back. So now we're just trying to doctor that back up. Kind of hate that I had to do that, but I didn't really have much choice in the matter. Looks like it's going to be a 2-clamp operation here. I left quite a bit of meat on the outside, so now I got to try and dress it back. I'm not going to worry about coming all the way back. When I get to shaping my inwales for the deck crown, that's when I'm going to worry about finalizing my shape back here. But for the moment, I'm just going to hog off the extra material. And you can see I've netted already. I'm just going to do it by hand. I don't want to get too deep, because if I start hitting the edge of the planking here, I could break some planking out, and that would be a nasty thing. But this hull is a bit hard to hang on to because it's sitting in these slings. It's slippery, wants to slide around. So the real trick is trying to brace it in some way that I can actually do this work. And of course, I can only brace it in a couple of different ways, and that really restricts how I can use my hands here. So it's a bit of a juggling act for sure. I want to leave a little meat because I haven't decided if I want to try and put some crown into this area. I think it'll probably be flat back here. We'll have the foredeck crown, but as we get towards the stern here, I think we're gonna let it flatten out, because trying to put a crown into here and plank it is going to be difficult. And I'll be able to take plywood up to about here, but then it's going to start changing shape radically enough that I don't think I'm going to be able to wrestle plywood down over here anyway. So I think we're going to go back to using some of the leftovers from the hull material to plank this over. And we'll probably I'm not going to worry about doing it diagonally. because we're going to glass over the whole thing. I'll just sort of do one layer of yellow cedar and then another layer of the mahogany over top of that. I'll have a look at my deck crown pattern here. And so as it stands, despite the fact that I've been doing this flat, I'm still well within range of my actual deck crown. And while this has got a fair bit of, it's got about 3/4 of an inch over its whole width, when you get down to these areas back here, it's actually pretty close to flat. That's good enough for now. We take these things in stages. I'm going to clean up my little filler pieces here on my inwales. So when I chopped my inwales back to fit this blocking in, I really kind of made a mess out of them. So I had to make some little filler pieces to fill in the gap. So I'm going to put a bit of time into trying to clean those up a bit. I could not clean them up, to be honest, because these are again, it's getting buried. But I like to make things look nice through the whole process. That's it for today, folks. Now please come back next time where we're going to keep working on the shear structure of this boat. Now if you can help us out on Patreon, I really appreciate that. There's a link right up here or down in the description. And don't forget to subscribe and maybe watch another video right down here. And next time we will be back with some more fun and adventures in wooden boat building. That's so stupid. Where do you come up with this stuff? Ciao for now, folks.